Welcome to Third Rock Radio's coverage of the Artemis 1 launch, presented by Raytheon Intelligence and Space, creating solutions that enable the greatest scientific discoveries in space. Right now, Raytheon Intelligence and Space is seeking top talent for their team to push the development of technology across the global space industry. Apply today at rtx.com/RISjobs. Now, from the Third Rock Radio studios, based in Houston, Texas, this is coverage of the Artemis 1 launch.
Okay, NASA Test Director Jeff Spaulding getting ready to conduct the readiness poll, so we are getting close. We're going to pull up the audio now so that you can listen in.
LPs go. And rock.
Rockets go.
All right, copy all. And Launch Director NTD, our launch team is ready to proceed at this time.
I copy all NTD. At this time, I will proceed with my poll. And attention on 232, this is the Launch Director performing the final poll for launch. Verify no constraints and go for launch. EGS Program Chief Engineer.
EGS Program Chief Engineer verifies that the EGS, SLS, and Orion Program Chief Engineers have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, Greg. Thank you. EGS Chief Safety Officer.
The EGS CSO verifies the SLS, Orion, and EGS CSOs have no constraints and are go for launch.
Copy, John. Thank you. Range Weather.
Weather has no constraints and weather is go for launch.
Copy, LWO. And Mission Manager. And Mission Manager, Launch Director.
Launch Director, Mission Manager on 232. The mission management team has been polled. You have a go to proceed with terminal count and launch of Artemis 1.
I copy all. Thank you. And NTD, Launch Director.
Go ahead, Launch Director.
Yes, sir. On behalf of all the men and women across our great nation who have worked to bring this hardware together to make this day possible, and for the Artemis generation, this is for you. At this time, I give you a go to resume count and launch Artemis 1.
Copy, Launch Director, and thank you. All right, we do have a couple of steps to configure, and then we will be ready to resume the clock. CVSE, NTD.
CVSC here.
Initiate recording of Orion cameras at this time.
In work.
NTD.
RSR here.
Perform the booster ignition SNA arm rotation enable.
NDT, RSR, booster ignition SNA arm and rotation enable is complete.
And I copy. Thank you.
Okay, so there you heard the poll from Launch Director.
Early.
Getting ready to get that new T0 time. The poll that you heard was the NASA Test Director's poll. And
all right, and we have verified no cutouts at this time. And all personnel, we are going to resume the clock. GLS, you can resume the clock on your mark.
GLS copies. Countdown clock will resume on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. GLS mainline has been initiated.
Okay.
T-minus 10 minutes and counting.
We are T-minus 10 minutes away from liftoff of Artemis 1. As you can see, the clock is now moving. Let's put that up. T-minus 9 minutes and 47 seconds. The L-minus 15 poll complete.
Show 06:47:44 is the new liftoff time.
Affirm.
Okay.
Oh, 1:47:44. 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time and 44 seconds. We went straight into terminal count.
Coverage of the Artemis 1 launch on Third Rock Radio is presented by Raytheon Intelligence and Space. There's nothing every day about every day. Find them online at raytheonintelligenceandspace.com/RIS jobs.
Thank you for joining us here on Third Rock Radio for launch coverage of the Artemis 1 mission. So we just, after several delays, got a go for launch. The T clock is, terminal clock, I believe, is back on. So we're down to about 8 minutes and 40 seconds away from the launch of Artemis 1.
Yeah, very excited about that. And we're sorry we had to stay so long away from you guys. But the problem is we were waiting just like you all were when they could finally figure out how long it's going to be. But we are ready to roll. Now, real quick, while no people will be on board Orion, the spacecraft will host 3 simulated humans. There are actually 2 mannequins that are supplied by Europe and by NASA. The third crew member, I'm sure you've heard us talking about, is a Moonikin. He's named after Apollo 13 engineer Arturo Campos, and the Moonikin includes sensors for acceleration, vibration, and radiation to assess the stresses of space on a human being during launch. And that's not all that's going to be on board. This is a tradition that NASA's been doing for years. Snoopy, of course, from Peanuts, is going to be the official zero-gravity indicator for the flight of Artemis 1.
And so that will be in the Orion capsule. And basically, the rocket's design breaks down into 2 main parts, the Orion capsule and the Space Launch System. And we're about to get a load of these powerful engines, okay?
I think it's huge.
Okay, so the energy output of the RS-25 engines, if you convert it into electricity, they would power nearly 850,000 miles of streetlights on a road stretching to the moon and then back and then 15 times around the Earth, according to NASA. So they will accelerate the rocket at 17,000 miles an hour during the first 8 minutes of the flight. So to put it into context, it weighs 5.75 million pounds when fully fueled for launch, which it is. Yet it will climb nearly 500 feet straight up in just 7 seconds.
Unbelievable.
That's some juice.
And when
that's
NASA,
some power.
Yes, that's right. And when NASA first sent man to the moon during the Apollo 11 mission, the Saturn V just reached a top speed of a little over 6,000 miles per hour. So there's context there. So when the rocket's main engines shut down 8 minutes after liftoff, the rocket will be moving at around 18,000 miles an hour. And that is fast enough to cover 88 football fields placed end to end in 1 second.
Oh, wow.
And then the rocket's upper stage will increase the velocity to 22,600 miles an hour, or 110 football fields per second, to break out of Earth orbit and send the Orion capsule to the moon.
Wow.
And that's where we're going.
That is crazy.
In just minutes.
Yes, indeed. All right, I say we take a quick time out, check in with NASA TV, then we're going to come back and wrap up our end, and we're going to let you hear this launch as it's about 6 minutes away. We'll be right back on Third Rock Radio. Coverage of the Artemis 1 launch on Third Rock Radio is presented by Raytheon Intelligence and Space, solving the most critical challenges of space. Find them online at raytheonintelligenceandspace.com/RIS jobs.
The liquid oxygen tank will come a little later. Now we're arming the Orion ascent pyros and transfer to internal power. The Launch Abort System, or LAS jettison motor, is now armed. On this flight, the abort motor is inactive because there is no crew on board. Up next is the Flight Termination System, or FTS, which gives the Space Force the ability to destruct the rocket if it goes in the wrong direction. Let's listen in for that.
GLS is go for FTS arm.
The Flight Termination System is now armed. Coming up at 4 minutes and 40 seconds, a big moment. This is where the RS-25 engines and their bleed go to high flow. It's been a little tricky to dial in.
GLS is go for LH2 high flow bleed check.
Good word, we've passed that. The cryo team got the LH2 engine bleed pressure loop dialed in. They are now at the right temperature for launch. Countdown continues. T-minus 4
Coverage of the
minutes,
Artemis
15
1
seconds.
launch on Third Rock Radio is presented by Raytheon Intelligence and Space. Pushing the edges of technology, join their team today. Find them online at raytheonintelligenceandspace.com/RIS jobs.
And thank you so much for joining us for our live broadcast. This is so exciting. We have been waiting for this for some time. I'm Donna McKenzie. Pam Kelly's with me. Steve Robinson.
Yes.
And we are now at T-minus 3 minutes and 47 seconds to liftoff.
Okay, guys, so before we launch, since we have a minute, I'm going to put you to the test. Quick trivia question for you.
Oh, no.
Okay, so everything about the NASA Orion spacecraft is new, and that includes a new entry technique. So will the Orion spacecraft test as it returns to Earth from the moon? What new entry technique will it test? Will it be the A, skip entry maneuver, B, point entry maneuver, C, coast-to-coast entry, or D, atmosphere entry? Skip, point, coast-to-coast, or atmosphere?
I'm going to guess coast to coast.
I'm going to say skip.
Oh, Donna McKenzie. Boom, boom, boom.
Okay.
This is neat. Orion will attempt the first skip entry for a human spacecraft. It's like skipping a rock across the surface of a pond. The capsule uses Earth's upper atmosphere to slow down and generate lift, skipping back out into space. After the skip, Orion re-enters Earth's atmosphere for landing. Like
That's amazing.
Skipping a rock.
That is just amazing.
Donna cheated. She looked over your shoulder on that one.
Well, there's so many people who are involved around the world with the Artemis missions. And according to NASA, every state in the United States has contributed to the design of the Artemis mission through partnerships with private companies and with universities. Every corner of our nation can stake a claim in the success of the mission.
Very
I think that's
cool.
amazing.
That's awesome. All right, we got about 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Real quick, another NASA tradition that's been going on for years and years for every one of their missions is when NASA puts people's names on board. Now, on board the Orion spacecraft, which is taking off in just a little bit, 3.4 million names.
Including mine.
Including mine, too. Were submitted. We hope you've enjoyed your time with us this evening. It's been a long evening, but it looks like we are going to be launching in just a little bit. We will keep the launch. You will hear it live here on Third Rock Radio. So thanks again for joining us this evening. I'm Steve Robinson, along with Donna McKenzie and Pam Kelly. Got to thank our producer, Keegan Lucas, for doing a great job. And just enjoy this launch. It is something that it's monumental in space
historic.
history. So enjoy it right here on Third Rock, and we will talk to you tomorrow.
Coverage of the Artemis 1 launch on Third Rock Radio is presented by Raytheon Intelligence and Space. There's nothing every day about every day. Find them online at raytheonintelligenceandspace.com/RIS jobs.
Batteries. So if we have a hold, we'd have to recycle back to T-minus 10 minutes and recharge those batteries. The count continues. A note now, shortly after liftoff.
1 minute.
Shortly after liftoff, Mission Control Houston will take control of the rocket, and my colleague, Leah Cheshire, will take over commentary. T-minus 50 seconds and counting. Coming up at T-minus 33 seconds, the GLS will hand off control to the ALS. This is the autonomous launch sequencer. On board the rocket, it will take over command and control of the rocket. But the ALS will check, make sure there's no holds coming from the ground up until T-minus 2
GLS
seconds.
is go for ALS.
And we are go for ALS. The Space Launch System is now counting down to liftoff of Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon. Launch team can no longer recycle the count. Sound suppressor water now flowing under the ML. And here we go.
10.
Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiated. 7, 6, 5. 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
All 4 RS-25 engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max Q at about 1 minute and 9 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket. now traveling 607 miles per hour. You're looking at 8.8 million pounds of maximum thrust. Quiet here in the loops in mission control. The 4 core stage engines are throttling down ahead of passing through max Q. Now 1 minute, 21 seconds into the flight, traveling at 1,420 miles per hour. The 4 core stage engines are back at maximum thrust. The next major milestone will be for the solid rocket boosters to cut off and jettison about 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, so about 30 seconds from now. Again, quiet here in Mission Control Houston as teams continue monitoring the flight of Artemis 1. We're now 16 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour. Standing by for solid rocket booster jettison and shortly thereafter. Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated, these 177-foot boosters. Now the core stage continues to power the flight of Orion, all 4 RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange. 2 minutes and 36 seconds into the flight. Hearing nominal calls here in Mission Control Houston. We've still got 4 good engines on the core stage. Next up, we'll be looking for the service module fairing to separate. This is 3 15 by 15 foot fairing panels, providing structural support, protecting the service module. Those will separate at about 3 minutes and 11 seconds into flight, and very shortly thereafter will be followed by the launch abort system separation. Just over 3 minutes into the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 4,060 miles per hour, 83 miles downrange. We just had confirmation that the service module fairing has separated. And that the launch abort system pyros have fired, separating those from Orion as well. For future crew members, we just heard the call for 3 engine press, meaning if SLS were to lose an engine at this point in the mission, we could still achieve a nominal mission. We would just have an extended main engine cutoff time. However, we still have 4 good engines, all at maximum thrust right now, powering the first flight of Artemis at 5,200 miles per hour, 148 miles downrange. We're 4 minutes and 16 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. So far, we've had a clean ascent. We saw those solid rocket boosters jettison about 2 minutes and 11 seconds after liftoff. Shortly after, we had the service module panels fairings separate, as well as the launch abort system. The launch abort system was inert for this flight, except to perform this separation. Those 4 core stage engines will continue to fire and power the flight of Artemis 1, now traveling over 6,800 miles per hour, 229 miles downrange. Booster flight controller reports that the engines are looking good. Our core stage main engine cutoff time is about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. We are now at 5 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, 7,656 miles per hour. Again, 4 good core stage engines, those 4 RS-25 engines. The last time those core stage engines flew, they were taking space shuttles to orbit, and now with upgraded capabilities, they're launching the future of human spaceflight. 5 minutes and 42 seconds into the mission, we are now traveling 8,800 miles per hour, 345 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center. Again, we are anticipating core stage main engine cutoff at about 8 minutes and 3 seconds. And about 10 seconds later, we'll see core stage separation, at which point Orion and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage will be flying free. Now traveling over 10,000 miles per hour, 6 minutes and 15 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1, 427 miles downrange. Quiet here on the loops in Mission Control Houston. Teams continue to monitor this first flight. About a minute and a half now until that core stage main engine cutoff time. Our 4 core stage engines continue to fire at maximum thrust.
This concludes the live coverage of the Artemis 1 launch on Third Rock Radio, presented by Raytheon Intelligence and Space, building space technologies to advance life here on Earth and beyond. Visit RTX.com for more details on their involvement with the Artemis program and to join the team at rtx.com/RISjobs. From satellites that observe our planet and keep us safe, to systems and software that enable the most difficult space missions, there's nothing every day about every day at Raytheon Intelligence and Space. From the entire staff at Third Rock Radio, based in Houston, Texas, thank you for joining us for this historic event.